Top 10 Salacious Moments. Hollywood Golden Age wants you to forget. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just about red carpets and glamorous stars. It was also riddled with shocking scandals, secrets, and betrayals that have been buried for decades. From illicit affairs to dark secrets, the true stories behind some of your favorite icons are far more scandalous than you could ever imagine. Joan Crawford, Charlie Chaplin, and more were tangled in webs of controversy that the industry would prefer you never knew. Get ready to uncover the untold truths Hollywood desperately wants to forget. Which of these jaw-dropping moments surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Joan Crawford porn scandal. Joan Crawford was one of Hollywood's most glamorous and successful stars of the golden age. Known for her strong-willed, fierce ambition and acting talent, she became an icon after winning an Oscar for Mildred Pierce 1945 and dominating the screen with her striking presence. However, Crawford's career and personal life were not as pristine as they appeared. A notorious scandal that has followed her legacy for decades involves her alleged involvement in a pornographic film early in her career. The controversy began with whispers that Joan Crawford had starred in a film called Velvet Lips, which was not a typical Hollywood production, but rather an adult film. According to rumors, her brother SALACIOUS sold copies of this movie to whoever would pay the highest price. While no copies of the film have ever surfaced, stories about its existence have persisted for years. Crawford, who was known for her aggressive approach to securing roles and advancing in Hollywood, reportedly became a target of blackmail related to this film. Her first husband, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., claimed that she was blackmailed with the film during their honeymoon, a fact that added to the mystery surrounding her rise to fame. Crawford steadfastly denied ever being in such a film, even until her death in 1977. She maintained that the woman in Velvet Lips was not her. Despite these denials, a report in the FBI file suggests the film's existence, hinting at a larger studio cover-up. Crawford's biographers and industry insiders have since claimed that studio fixers worked tirelessly to suppress the film's release, with some suggesting that the studio even paid her brother up to $100,000 to keep the story quiet. Even after her passing, her family troubles continued. Her daughter, Christina Crawford, famously wrote, "Mommy Dearest," a tell-all book that portrayed Joan Crawford in a harsh light, revealing many disturbing aspects of their relationship. This book and the subsequent film adaptation only deepened the public's perception of Joan Crawford as a complicated and troubled figure, clouding her achievements with the shadows of scandal and abuse. While Crawford's contributions to Hollywood and her accomplishments as an actress cannot be denied, the pornographic film scandal remains one of the most salacious and controversial chapters in her storied career. It's a story Hollywood would rather forget, but one that continues to fascinate the public even decades later. Jean Harlow was forced to marry. Jean Harlow, often referred to as the original blonde bombshell, was one of Hollywood's brightest stars during the 1930s. Known for her sultry beauty and fiery personality, she captivated audiences with her performances in films like Hell's Angels 1930 and Red Dust 1932. But despite her success, Harlow's personal life was filled with tragedy, manipulation, and scandal, with one of the most shocking moments being her forced marriage to a man she didn't love. Harlow's love life was marked by a series of turbulent relationships, starting with her first marriage at the tender age of 16. In 1927, she married the wealthy and much older businessman Charles McGrew, but the marriage was short-lived, ending just a few years later. The tragedy deepened when her second husband, Paul Byrne, who was a studio executive, died under mysterious circumstances. Officially ruled as a suicide, rumors swirled that Byrne's death was linked to the pressures of their relationship and Harlow's involvement in the scandalous world of Hollywood. By 1933, Harlow's personal life was in turmoil after she had an affair with married boxer Max Baer. When the scandal of their affair began to threaten her career, the studio MGM stepped in. They orchestrated a marriage between Harlow and Harold Rawson, a cinematographer, to cover up the affair. This marriage of convenience was purely for show, and the union was quickly dissolved once the public's attention shifted elsewhere. Harlow, already emotionally devastated by the death of her first husband and the turmoil surrounding her second marriage, found herself trapped in a relationship she neither wanted nor asked for. But Harlow's heartbreak didn't end there. In 1935, she fell in love with actor William Powell, and despite her strong desire to marry him and settle down, Powell was opposed to the idea of having children, which deeply conflicted with Harlow's longing for a family. Eventually, Harlow discovered she was pregnant by Powell, but knowing he didn't want children and fearful of the impact this would have on her career, Harlow chose to abort the child. This difficult decision left her emotionally and physically scarred, and it was a reflection of the harsh realities Hollywood's leading women had to endure to preserve their careers. Tragically, Harlow's life ended at the young age of 26, likely as a result of complications from her abortion and a severe illness. She died in 1937 from kidney failure, just as her career was reaching new heights. Harlow's legacy is one of incredible talent and undeniable beauty, but her personal life was a testament to the enormous pressures that women in Hollywood faced. Her forced marriages, abortion, and tumultuous relationships serve as a reminder of the often terrible sacrifices that many of the stars of Hollywood's golden age were compelled to make in order to maintain their fame and status. William Randolph Hearst tried to kill Charlie Chaplin. William Randolph Hearst, one of the most powerful media moguls of the 20th century, wielded immense influence over American public opinion through his newspaper empire. His reach was vast, controlling not only news outlets, but also political narratives and even the image of Hollywood itself. However, beneath his polished public persona lay a man with a ruthless temper and a complex personal life, which led to one of Hollywood's most shocking and mysterious incidents, the alleged attempt to kill Charlie Chaplin. In the early 1920s, Hearst was embroiled in a tumultuous affair with actress Marion Davies. Despite being in a long-term relationship with Hearst, Davies became romantically involved with Chaplin, a notorious womanizer and comedic genius. The affair between Davies and Chaplin allegedly sent Hearst into a fit of rage. His jealousy, combined with his immense power, fueled an intense desire to confront Chaplin and take matters into his own hands. In 1924, Hearst invited Chaplin and a group of other Hollywood stars aboard his luxurious yacht for a gathering. What was supposed to be a casual social event turned into a tense confrontation between the two men. It is rumored that Hearst, infuriated by the affair between his mistress and Chaplin, attempted to shoot the actor during the trip. According to several reports, Hearst fired at Chaplin, but missed instead, accidentally killing a movie producer named Thomas Ince. This tragic incident, which occurred under suspicious circumstances, was quickly covered up by Hearst's powerful media outlets, ensuring that the true nature of the event remained shrouded in mystery. The death of Ince was officially attributed to natural causes, with the press being quick to blame his passing on digestive issues. However, rumors of foul play persisted. Some witnesses claimed that Ince had been shot in the head, which suggested a more sinister series of events than a mere illness. Even more suspiciously, the Los Angeles Times removed the headline reporting the death from subsequent editions, fueling further speculation. Despite the secrecy surrounding the incident, the rumors persisted for years, with many believing that Hearst had tried to eliminate Chaplin as a rival for Davies's affection. The scandal not only tarnished Hearst's reputation, but also left a lingering question about the darker side of the man who controlled much of American media. Chaplin, who had survived the encounter, continued to rise to fame, but the near-death encounter would remain one of the most peculiar and dangerous episodes of Hollywood's golden age. This incident encapsulates the dangerous cocktail of power jealousy and media manipulation that dominated Hollywood at the time. It also highlights the lengths to which the wealthy elite like Hearst would go to maintain control over their personal lives, even resorting to violence to eliminate those they viewed as threats. While the true events of that fateful day may never be fully known, the story of Hearst's attempt on Chaplin's life remains one of the most salacious and darkly fascinating tales of old Hollywood. Patricia Douglas was raped. The story of Patricia Douglas is one of the most heartbreaking and overlooked scandals of Hollywood's golden age. A young, aspiring actress, Patricia was lured to an MGM screen test in 1932, a decision that would change her life forever. This seemingly innocent audition turned out to be nothing more than a front for a sex party thrown by the studio's powerful sales executives. Patricia, just 20 years old at the time, was from Missouri and had come to Hollywood to make a name for herself. She was eager to find work and willing to take risks, believing that this screen test would be her big break. However, the reality was far darker. The event hosted at the MGM offices was not a legitimate audition, but instead a 3-day-long drinking and debauchery-filled gathering with about 300 sales executives and 120 young women, including Patricia, in attendance. These young women were told they would be paid for their time and would receive a hot meal, but they had no idea they were being coerced into a dangerous situation. The executives at the event were heavily intoxicated, and the atmosphere quickly became predatory. Patricia and the other women had no way to leave, as they were isolated without cars or phones. As the night went on, the women were sexually assaulted by the men in attendance. Patricia, unfortunately, was brutally raped by one of the MGM salesmen, David Ross, who took advantage of her vulnerability. After the assault, Patricia was left in a state of shock, and despite the overwhelming sense of fear and trauma, she made the courageous decision to press charges against Ross. However, MGM, using its vast power and influence, quickly moved to suppress the incident. The studio hired the notorious Pinkerton Detective Agency to dig up dirt on Patricia, attempting to discredit her by spreading false rumors about her promiscuity and diseases she supposedly carried. They even paid off witnesses to backtrack on their testimonies and claim that they hadn't seen anything. MGM went to great lengths to ruin Patricia's credibility, and as a result, the case was dismissed. Patricia was forced into silence, her reputation forever tarnished by the studio's efforts to protect its own interests. She was subsequently blacklisted from Hollywood, and her career was effectively destroyed before it could even begin. Though she eventually became an advocate for justice and spoke out about her experience in later years, Patricia Douglas's story remains one of the darkest and most egregious examples of exploitation and abuse by the studio system in the 1930s. Her courage to press charges despite the immense personal and professional risks stands as a powerful reminder of the dangers women faced in Hollywood, a system dominated by predatory men who used their power to control and silence those who dared to speak out. Patricia Douglas's tragic story reflects the grim reality of how the studio system used its immense power to protect its perpetrators and cover up the abuse of women, leaving many of them to suffer in silence. Tallulah Bankhead had multiple abortions. Tallulah Bankhead was one of the most daring and unconventional figures of Hollywood's golden age. Known for her striking beauty, commanding presence, and unapologetic attitude, Bankhead was both adored and scandalized for her open defiance of the era's social norms. A highly talented actress and a Broadway star, she was equally infamous for her larger-than-life personality, her wild love affairs, and her unapologetic embrace of her sexuality. However, behind her glamorous public image, Bankhead's personal life was fraught with heartache, particularly due to the multiple abortions she underwent throughout her career. Bankhead's sexual escapades were well known throughout Hollywood, and she was infamous for her promiscuity. At one point, she proudly boasted of having had 185 lovers, a number that spoke to her unapologetic approach to sex and relationships. Her romantic encounters included affairs with both men and women, and her boisterous, free-spirited lifestyle made her a beloved yet controversial figure in the entertainment world. Bankhead's sexual appetite, while celebrated by some, became a source of intense scrutiny and public gossip. As an actress in an industry that demanded perfection, Bankhead's personal life was subject to the pressures and expectations of Hollywood's studio system. By the time she turned 30, Bankhead had undergone at least 4 abortions, all of which were forced upon her by the studio, which feared that any pregnancy would end her career. Studios were notoriously controlling over their actresses, dictating not only their professional lives but their personal decisions as well. The idea of an unmarried woman having a child was seen as unacceptable by the industry, leading many actresses to have abortions, sometimes against their will, to maintain their careers. Bankhead, who knew all too well the cost of Hollywood's demands, became a victim of this controlling system. Her abortions were conducted in secrecy, and she was often sent to private hospitals under false names to avoid public scrutiny. Despite the immense physical and emotional toll these procedures took on her, Bankhead continued to pursue her career with the same intensity and passion that defined her public persona. Unfortunately, her health suffered in the aftermath of these procedures. Years later, Bankhead expressed deep regret over her decision to undergo these abortions, especially after she was unable to have children due to complications caused by a hysterectomy. This painful reality stemmed from a bout of gonorrhea, which had caused significant damage to her reproductive system, further limiting her chances of becoming a mother. Bankhead's story is a sobering reminder of the cost that Hollywood's women were often forced to pay to achieve fame and success during the Golden Age. Women like her were forced to conform to the strict demands of the studio system, which dictated everything from their appearance to their reproductive choices. Though Bankhead's career continued to flourish, her personal life was marred by the emotional scars of her abortions and the toll they took on her health. She later became a staunch advocate for the rights of women, though by then her career and personal life had already been irreversibly altered by the pressures of Hollywood. Bankhead's life is a testament to the personal sacrifices made by many women in Hollywood during an era when their bodies and choices were often not their own. Errol Flynn was a pervert. Errol Flynn, the legendary actor known for his swashbuckling roles in films like The Adventures of Robin Hood 1938 and Captain Blood 1935, was one of Hollywood's most charismatic and beloved stars during the 1930s and 1940s. With his rugged good looks, charm, and daredevil persona, Flynn captured the hearts of millions of fans. However, beneath his dashing exterior lay a man whose personal life was plagued by scandal, criminal allegations, and deeply troubling behavior. Flynn's reputation as a womanizer and his sexual exploits eventually led to him being branded as a pervert by some, with accusations that painted a disturbing picture of his relationships with women and young girls. Flynn's public persona was built on his romantic escapades and his notorious relationships with some of Hollywood's most famous actresses. He was known for being a relentless womanizer, often seen in the company of beautiful women. However, it was his relationship with younger women that would become the source of the most disturbing allegations. In 1943, Flynn was put on trial for the statutory rape of 2 teenage girls, a case that shocked the public and tarnished his previously untarnished image as a charming leading man. The trial, which was highly publicized, involved accusations that Flynn had engaged in sexual relations with the 2 girls, both under the age of consent, while they were in their teens. Flynn was ultimately acquitted of all charges, but the trial and the accusations against him became part of the narrative surrounding his life and career. In addition to the rape trial, rumors of Flynn's penchant for underage girls were rampant. According to some sources, Flynn was known to have engaged in sexual activity with numerous young women, including those who were barely out of their teenage years. There were also reports that Flynn had set up hidden mirrors in his home to spy on his female guests, further reinforcing his reputation as a man whose interests extended far beyond the boundaries of normal sexual behavior. Flynn's behavior was often fueled by alcohol and drugs, and he was notorious for his reckless disregard for consequences, particularly when it came to his sexual relationships. Despite these scandalous aspects of his life, Flynn's career continued to thrive for several more years, and he remained a favorite among fans. However, the dark truths about his personal life continued to linger, especially in the years following his death in 1959. His behavior was later examined in the context of Hollywood's larger culture of exploitation and abuse, where the boundaries between consensual relationships and coercion were often blurred, and young women were treated as little more than disposable commodities. Errol Flynn's story is a tragic example of the double standards that existed in Hollywood at the time. While his on-screen persona remained largely untarnished, The darker elements of his off-screen life were often ignored or dismissed by the public. However, as time has passed, the truth about his troubling sexual behavior has become undeniable, and Flynn's reputation has been irrevocably stained by his actions. Today, while his legacy as a screen legend endures, so too does the darker side of his story, which serves as a cautionary tale about the exploitation and mistreatment of women in Hollywood. Judy Garland was forced to take drugs. Judy Garland, one of Hollywood's most beloved icons, is best known for her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, a film that catapulted her to stardom and made her a household name. Her natural talent, charm, and voice captivated audiences worldwide, and she quickly became one of the most promising young stars in Hollywood. However, behind her radiant public image lay a tragic story of exploitation, addiction, and abuse at the hands of the very studio that made her a star. From the very beginning of her career at MGM, Garland was subjected to intense pressure from the studio to maintain a youthful appearance and work long hours under grueling conditions. As a young teenager, Garland was already a rising star, but the studio saw her more as a commodity than a person. MGM executives, determined to maintain her slim figure and keep her energized for endless hours of filming, started prescribing her dangerous substances to keep her going. At just 16 years old, Garland was given amphetamines to stay awake and perform, and barbiturates to help her sleep after exhausting workdays that could last up to 18 hours. The studio system, notorious for its control over stars, took things even further. Garland was essentially forced into taking these drugs to meet the demands of her career with little regard for her physical and mental health. The combination of stimulants and sedatives led to a cycle of dependence that she struggled to break for the rest of her life. The drugs kept her awake and performing at a high level, but also took a devastating toll on her body and mind. In addition to her drug dependency, Garland faced tremendous emotional strain. When she became pregnant as a young adult, the studio arranged for an abortion to prevent any interference with her career. This forced procedure added to the emotional burden she was already carrying. MGM also controlled her relationships, often dictating who she could or could not marry, and consistently pushing her to fit the mold of the wholesome, all-American girl, despite her growing personal struggles. Garland's battle with addiction continued into her adulthood, and by the time she starred in Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, she was already hooked on drugs. Her ongoing addiction to amphetamines and barbiturates became so severe that the studio had to intervene multiple times, sending her to clinics and rehab, but nothing could seem to break the cycle. Her dependence on these substances only worsened as the years went by, leading to multiple hospitalizations and a spiral of health problems. By the time she reached her 40s, Garland's health had deteriorated drastically, and her career began to suffer as a result of her addiction. Despite her personal and professional turmoil, she continued to perform, but her public image had shifted from the wholesome image of the Wizard of Oz to that of a tragic figure battling both addiction and the demons of an industry that had exploited her. Judy Garland's story is a tragic example of how the Hollywood studio system abused and manipulated its stars, especially young women, for the sake of profit. She was forced to take drugs to meet the demands of her career, which ultimately led to a lifetime of struggles with addiction, mental health issues, and physical deterioration. Garland passed away at the young age of 47 in 1969 from a barbiturate overdose, but her legacy as a star continues to endure. However, her story serves as a poignant reminder of the darker side of fame, where the cost of success could be far too high for those who sought it. Fatty Arbuckle Roscoe. Fatty Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars of Hollywood's silent film era, known for his slapstick comedy and physical humor. He was one of the highest-paid actors in the 1920s and had a booming career that included working with other film legends like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. His jovial on-screen persona, coupled with his ability to entertain millions, made him a beloved figure in early cinema. However, this success came to an abrupt and tragic end in 1921 after an incident at a lavish party that led to one of the most scandalous trials in Hollywood history. The story began when Arbuckle threw a party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco to celebrate Labor Day. Among the guests was Virginia Rappe, a 30-year-old actress who had previously worked with Arbuckle. The events of the night quickly spiraled into chaos. It was reported that Rappe was found in a distressing state after spending time alone in a room with Arbuckle. She was severely injured and her condition worsened over the next several days. On September 9th, Rappe died from what was determined to be a ruptured bladder, a condition that was later speculated to have been caused by physical trauma. The death of Virginia Rappe immediately became a scandal, with widespread rumors and accusations that Arbuckle had sexually assaulted her, causing her internal injuries. The media frenzy surrounding the case was massive, and Arbuckle was swiftly arrested and charged with manslaughter. His trial was one of the most highly publicized events of the era, and the public's opinion was divided. Many believed Arbuckle was guilty, while others saw him as a victim of Hollywood's harsh scrutiny. Despite the sensational nature of the case, the evidence against Arbuckle was circumstantial, and his defense team worked relentlessly to prove his innocence. Arbuckle himself vehemently denied any wrongdoing, claiming that Rappe had been drunk and that he had never assaulted her. The prosecution's case fell apart when key witnesses recanted their testimonies, and medical experts could not definitively prove that Arbuckle's actions had led to Rappe's death. After 2 mistrials, Arbuckle was finally acquitted on his 3rd trial with the jury, finding him not guilty. However, despite the acquittal, the damage to Arbuckle's career was irreversible. The Hollywood studio system, fearing the negative publicity, chose to distance itself from him. Arbuckle was banned from acting in major films and faced public backlash despite the lack of legal proof of his involvement in Rappe's death. The scandal left a permanent stain on his once promising career, and Arbuckle was forced into obscurity. In the years following the trial, Arbuckle made a modest comeback, but he was never able to regain the success he had before the scandal. In 1933, after years of struggling with his career, he was given a second chance by the Warner Brothers studio, which allowed him to direct under the pseudonym William Goodrich. However, Arbuckle's legacy was forever marred by the events of 1921. He passed away from a heart attack in 1933 at the age of 46, just as he was trying to rebuild his career. The story of Fatty Arbuckle is a tragic reminder of how one moment, one scandal can irrevocably change the course of a person's life. Despite his innocence being proven in court, the public's judgment and the media's sensationalism ruined his reputation forever, overshadowing his talent and contributions to early cinema. His story also sheds light on the power Hollywood studios had to control the careers of its stars, and how a scandal, regardless of its truth, could lead to permanent exile. Peg Entwistle, the tragic suicide at the Hollywood sign. Peg Entwistle, a young and promising actress in the 1930s, is perhaps best known for her tragic death, which became one of Hollywood's most infamous stories. Although her career in films was short-lived, her death by suicide at the Hollywood sign became a symbol of the pressures and heartbreak that many aspiring actors faced in the competitive and unforgiving world of Hollywood. Born in 1908 in Wales, Peg Entwistle moved to the United States with her family at a young age and eventually pursued acting. She began her career on Broadway and soon transitioned to Hollywood in the hopes of making a name for herself in film. Entwistle had appeared in several stage productions before being cast in her first and only major Hollywood film, 13 Women, 1932. Unfortunately, her part was cut from the final version of the film, and she was left with little to show for her time in Hollywood. Entwistle struggled to find meaningful work in the film industry, and her prospects as an actress seemed dim. Despite being a talented performer, the lack of opportunities and the constant pressure to succeed in an environment that could be both exploitative and brutal took a toll on her. In September 1932, after learning that her role in 13 Women had been reduced to just a few minutes of screen time, Entwistle's frustration and despair reached a breaking point. On the evening of September 16, 1932, at the age of 24, Peg Entwistle took her own life. She climbed to the top of the famous Hollywood sign, then known as the Hollywoodland sign, and jumped to her death. Her body was discovered the following morning, and her suicide note, which was later found, revealed her deep sadness and feelings of failure. In her note, Entwistle expressed the overwhelming sense of disappointment and despair she felt after her unfulfilled Hollywood career. While the exact reasons behind Entwistle's suicide remain speculative, it is clear that the pressures of Hollywood combined with her professional setbacks and personal struggles contributed to her tragic decision. Her death, although not widely reported at the time, became a haunting symbol of the dark side of fame and the destructive effects of Hollywood's demanding nature on young and vulnerable stars. Entwistle's story gained renewed attention over the years, especially after the Hollywood sign became one of the most iconic landmarks in the world. In 2014, the tragic tale of Peg Entwistle was commemorated with a special event where film enthusiasts gathered to honor her memory and raise awareness about suicide prevention. This gathering aimed to shed light on the often overlooked realities of the entertainment industry, where rejection and failure can sometimes become unbearable for those who dream of stardom. Peg Entwistle's death remains a somber chapter in the history of Hollywood, reminding us of the emotional toll that fame and failure can have on individuals, especially in a time when mental health was rarely discussed. Though she only briefly touched the silver screen, her legacy endures as a tragic reminder of the hidden struggles faced by many in the entertainment industry. Sadistic Charlie Chaplin's obsession with teen girls. Charlie Chaplin, one of the most iconic figures in Hollywood history, revolutionized the film industry with his brilliant physical comedy and timeless performances, particularly his portrayal of the tramp. His legacy as a comedic genius is undeniable, but beneath the charm of his on-screen persona lies a deeply troubling personal life that casts a shadow over his career. Known for his slapstick humor, Chaplin's relationships with young women, especially teenagers, became a significant and controversial part of his legacy. In the 1920s, Chaplin was at the height of his fame. His films like City Lights 1931 and The Gold Rush 1925 were wildly successful, and he had already established himself as one of the greatest filmmakers of the silent era. However, while his career was flourishing, his personal life was riddled with scandals. Chaplin's relationships with women were often far more sordid than his public image suggested. Chaplin's most scandalous affair was with 15-year-old actress Lita Grey, whom he married in 1924. Grey was pregnant with Chaplin's child when they wed, and their marriage was one of Hollywood's most controversial at the time due to her age. The marriage quickly soured, and the couple's divorce became a media sensation. In her divorce testimony, Grey made shocking claims about Chaplin's behavior, alleging that he had made degrading and abusive sexual demands of her. Among these accusations was that Chaplin had insisted she participate in a threesome with another woman and subjected her to other sexual acts that were considered scandalous and illegal at the time. Chaplin's legal battles with Grey were explosive, leading to a lengthy and highly publicized divorce case. Grey's testimony, which included graphic details of their sexual encounters, was a damning portrayal of Chaplin as a manipulative and abusive figure. Despite the scandal, Chaplin's career did not suffer significantly, and he continued to make successful films. However, this dark chapter in his personal life would forever tarnish his reputation, particularly in the eyes of future generations. This pattern of relationships with young women continued throughout Chaplin's life. In addition to Grey, Chaplin was linked to several other teenage girls during his time in Hollywood. His penchant for teenage brides and romantic partners raised eyebrows, especially given his status as a world-renowned celebrity. Chaplin's relationships with young women were seen as part of a disturbing trend in early Hollywood, where older men often preyed on younger actresses, and such behavior was either ignored or overlooked by the industry. As Chaplin aged, his relationships with young women became increasingly controversial. His marriage to his fourth wife, Una O'Neill, in 1943 was also subject to scrutiny, as O'Neill was just 18 years old at the time, while Chaplin was in his 50s. Though their marriage lasted for over 34 years and produced 8 children, The large age gap and Chaplin's history of marrying much younger women continued to spark debates about his behavior. Despite these controversies, Chaplin's impact on cinema is undeniable. His ability to captivate audiences with his silent performances, his role as a director, and his contributions to the film industry have ensured his place in history as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. However, the darker side of his personal life, particularly his relationships with young girls, remains a stain on his legacy. In recent years, Chaplin's actions have come under much more scrutiny, and his personal life has become the subject of critical examination, revealing a man whose genius was coupled with troubling behavior that cannot be ignored. Charlie Chaplin's story serves as a powerful reminder of how fame and talent can sometimes mask deeper moral failings. His genius as a filmmaker will always be remembered, but the scandalous and often predatory nature of his personal life remains an uncomfortable truth that complicates his legacy. The golden age of Hollywood may have been synonymous with glamour and elegance, but beneath the surface it was marred by dark secrets, shocking scandals, and unspeakable acts that the industry has desperately tried to erase. From Joan Crawford's alleged involvement in a pornographic film to Charlie Chaplin's disturbing relationships with underage girls, the stories that Hollywood wants to forget are both disturbing and fascinating. These salacious moments shed light on the harsh realities faced by stars and the lengths Hollywood went to protect its most powerful figures. Which of these scandals shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below.